this work with you. So in our very first session, we're going to talk about something that we don't talk about a lot, but this is kind of a fun thing to contemplate. We're going to actually talk about the quantum physics of writing and how your creative act is actually a quantum act. You're being quantumly creative when you engage in the process of writing. So really what I'm talking about when I talk about the quantum physics of writing is I'm talking about the power of language. Language is incredibly important. And in fact, Egypt as a nation, as a civilization, was powerful because one of the things that it had was a written system of communicating information. And that written system, writing, actually allowed Egypt to expand as a civilization. One of my very favorite words in the whole world is not an English word, it's a Hebrew word. It's the word davar. The word davar in Hebrew is the word for word, but it's also the word for thing. And if you go back to the Old Testament, in the Old Testament, God charged Adam, gave him the job of giving names to all the creation. And it was in the process of giving creation a name that it began to take form. And when we think about that in the context of our creativity and our creative process, the things you write about initiate form in some way, shape, or form, if you will, on the planet. So your words actually literally can become things. Words create, they endure, they allow for unity. They transmit, they are the interface between the divine, or your muse, if you will, and the human. They are power. They translate the infinite to the finite. They contain the codes for a story, and they literally contain or carry frequencies of energies. If you listen to something on the news or on TV or the computer and it feels icky, it's probably because the language itself that's being used has a quality of energy that's not particularly inspiring. We even know that DNA itself responds to language. When you speak to DNA that's in a jar of water, if you speak high frequency, high quality words to DNA, it actually expands. The coils begin to expand and the capacity for DNA to hold photons, light, increases. The opposite is also true. Scientists have even actually been able to program the syntax of language into radio frequency waves, and they're able to use language to actually splice DNA. That's a pretty phenomenal thing to think about. The bottom line is this: the language that we use, the stories we tell, they impact us deeply, and they absolutely have the power to create and expand the energy of well-being in the world. So here's just one last thing I want to show you. This is actually based on the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto, who has passed. By the way, this work has been expanded upon. So Dr. Masaru Emoto began to speak to water, and he watched how water would crystallize in different shapes depending on what you said to it. So on the left is a piece of crystallized water, sometimes known as a snowflake. On the left is a snowflake that has responded and crystallized to the word love. On the right is water that is sort of not very crystallized, but has crystallized in response to the phrase, "You make me sick." If this intrigues you, do go check out the work of Veda Austin, VedaAustin. She just published a brand new book. She's a water scientist from New Zealand who has taken this work, Dr. Emoto's work, to a whole new level, and it is mind-blowing. And let me just tell you, your words matter. Words matter. If you ever went to a magic party when you were a kid and the magician said or used the phrase abracadabra, if we translate that, that literally means I will create as I speak. It's an Aramaic word. The most powerful words that you can use, no matter what language you're using, is the phrase I am. That which we define ourselves to be, the story we tell about who we are, becomes who we end up experiencing as our identity in the world. So your I am equals what you create and the direction of your life. So let's talk about this in the context of what does it mean when you say to yourself, I'm an author, I'm a writer, I'm an inspirational force. I am someone who has a story to share. Let's talk about what happens when you use a powerful definition, a powerful I am statement about yourself as a writer. So I'm going to break down for you the components of the creative process. What happens when you tell a story, and what happens when you tell your personal story, your I am about who you are? How does that I am, that narrative you tell about yourself, Usually it's the one we're telling about ourselves in our head, but if you pay attention to your conversations that you have with your friends and your loved ones, sometimes it's also a story that we're telling each other about who we are. Let's explore the parts of the creative process that goes into translating the internal story of who you declare yourself to be and the manifestation of that story in your tangible reality. So the first component of the creative equation, the first component in how we make something real in the world, comes from the quantum field. You are right now, as you're listening to this program and watching us, you're literally sitting in a field filled of infinite moving possibilities. They're not in your life right now. They're not tangible or manifest, but you're swimming in this very moment in a field of infinite possibilities. This is what's called the quantum field, or you might have heard it referred to as the unmanifest reality. It's actually where your muse hangs out. So your muse is sort of this non-manifested creative force that's sorting through this infinite number of possibilities and ultimately deciding which one they're going to send your way. The second component in the creative process is called the mental and the emotional bodies. This is where you carry your conditioning. Now, your conditioning, a good way to sort of think about what is your conditioning, it's the collection of all the memories you have, all the stories you tell about yourself. It's everything that's happened to you over the course of your life. It's everything that you learned from your family of origin, that you learned in school. It's even your ancestral lineage. All of the things that make you think of yourself as the person you are part of your mental and emotional body and part of your conditioning. Another way to think of your conditioning is kind of like this. I'm going to badly quote Viktor Frankl. And there's a Viktor Frankl quotation that says, between stimulus and response, there's a gap. That's grossly paraphrasing the work of a genius, so forgive me. When we talk about what's in that gap between a stimulation or a stimulus and your response, it's actually your conditioning that lives in that gap. So when we tell a story about who we are, that story goes into that gap. And the story we tell about who we perceive ourselves to be, that story is what influences how we respond to that trigger. One of the things that happens when we write is we learn through the writing process how to gain better influence over what goes in that gap. This is why the story we tell about ourselves and who we are, as part of the writing process, whether you're literally writing your story or whether you're telling yourself a story about your ability to write, that story is going into that space between stimulus and response. And if the story you're telling about who you are as a writer, as somebody that has something valuable and important and precious to share with the world, if that story is not a good, empowered story, it's going to affect how you engage with your muse. So your conditioning is really evident. It really gives you evidence. The story you tell about who you are is really going to tell you a lot about the quality of your relationship with your muse. The third component of the creative process is your manifested reality. That's your life right now. So your life right now is really an expression of not only your relationship with your muse, but hopefully the desires of your muse. So if you've actively written a book or you're writing a book, you're in the process of getting ready to publish or market your book, that's evidence, that's tangible, manifested evidence of your relationship with your muse. So obviously there's something in that story that you tell about who you are that says your story is important. Your story is vital. You have something important and vital to contribute to the world through your story. And because you believe that, because that's part of your narrative, that's part of the story of who you think you are, you've actually engaged in a tangible relationship with your muse that's translated an idea out of the quantum field into the manifest reality. So a simple way of looking at this, if we want to make this really, really easy to understand, you're swimming in a field of infinite possibilities. You have your life right now. In between those two things is a filter, and that filter is you. It's your story that you tell about who you are and your relationship that you have with the story that you want to tell the world. So if you think about it, it's kind of interesting because the fact that you may have already thought about writing a book, or the fact that you're already engaged in the creative process of a book, means that you're already in the non-physical, non-manifest quantum world, you're already starting to build a field of information, like you're gathering the energy of potential. You're building a field of information that's going to eventually become manifest. It's going to literally drop into formation. And as you contemplate and think about your book and writing your book, I want you just to stop for a minute and really hear what I have to say, because you're not just writing a book. You're activating an incredibly complex and powerful field of information. So as you write your book or think about writing your book or entertain the idea, the possibility of writing a book, you're already also building a field of information that incorporates the postal system energetically. You're already putting into action all the parts that go into delivering your book to people. You're already building a field of information that involve your friends and family and anybody else that's going to buy your book. You're already building a field of information about anybody that's involved in any way with retail sales of your book. You're already building an information about your publishing team, your editors, the people who are going to proofread your book, the people who are going to lay out your book, design your cover, get your book up on Amazon and other online outlets, record your audiobook, whatever you end up doing. All of that field of information is already being built and aggregated as you think about it. Your readers are being aggregated. The internet and everything that goes into running the internet and building people's computers, all of that complexity, we call that in quantum physics the tangled hierarchy of all the parts of your book are being organized as you contemplate that writing process. So, I'm showing you this because I want you to really respect and honor the sacredness and the complexity and the power that you're generating by having an inspired idea, by following the cues and clues and the promptings of life's intelligence or your muse that's pushing on you, maybe pushing on you in the middle of the night or pushing on you when you wake up in the morning to get your message out to the world, to share your story with the world. You are so powerful, and that idea and that relationship that you have with the sacredness of that idea is so powerful that even as you contemplate it before you actually even put a single stroke on your computer, you're already building this very complex, powerful field of information that will eventually, once it reaches critical mass, drop into manifested reality. So, as I've been saying, creation runs information in order to create information. So as you start to create, you're building a body of information. The inspiration for your book is based on the desire of life's intelligence, and life wants us to use inspiration as a tool to transmit information. Your book is inspired within you to serve the expression of life's intelligence in response to a need. The reason why I'm telling you this is sometimes when we start the journey of writing a book, or even the journey of publishing or marketing a book, and this can come up in any stage in the journey of a book, we have a tendency to doubt ourselves. We have a tendency to ask, who am I to? We fall victim to, if you will, imposter syndrome, and we think we're not worthy, or we're not ready, or we're not able to. And I want to just say that's not true. The fact that you already have an idea about a book tells me that you're already dialed into the sacredness of that process and the brilliance of life's intelligence, who's tapped you, by the way, to create this piece of work. They called you. They called you because you're the one. And so if you're feeling that urging and you feel that desire, I want you to first and foremost start with a place of utter awe that you got called. That you got called to write that book, to make that contribution, and to recognize that that call comes in response to the need of the people who want to read your book. You are writing that book because that need, those readers have called you on the quantum level to create that piece of information or inspiration that they need. So one of the things I want you to contemplate as we explore the quantum purpose or the quantum physics of your book is, what is the need of your readers? as you've been working on this book or thinking about this book or writing this book or creating this book or thinking about creating this book or taking notes on this book, what is your story? What is your book in response to? What need does your book fulfill? What are your readers asking for? What are you fulfilling as an agent of life's intelligence? This need for your readers is the quantum purpose, if you will, for your book. You fulfilling this need is you listening to and honoring the call of life's intelligence to bring something forward that's not only going to be a part of your own transformational process and creative growth, but is actually also going to serve a higher purpose. You don't get an idea for a book by accident. You get an idea for a book because you got called. And whether it's a cozy mystery or a story of your own experience or something that you want to share with people because you think it's going to help people, don't judge the what you got called to do. Honor the fact that you got called. And you're the only one that got called to do that book for those readers. And recognize that that book that is calling you is there because it serves a purpose. And that purpose is, first and foremost, to serve the needs of the readers. And secondly, to support you on your own transformational journey of creating a tangible product from an inspiration. So to create the reality that you want to be experiencing, you have to tell a story about you as a writer that matches what you want. Sometimes when we start the journey of writing a book, the very first thing we have to do is go back and tackle our own inner story about ourselves, holding that sacred role as the writer. So I want you to explore not only what need does that book fulfill, what quantum purpose is your book serving, but also who are you as the writer? What narratives and what stories are you telling about yourself? Are you honoring the awesome nature of the call that you've received to write your book? And if you're telling yourself a story that maybe has imposter syndrome interwoven into it, maybe if you have a story that you're a little bit nervous about sharing with the world because it's vulnerable, maybe if you're telling a story that makes you a little bit nervous about what's going to happen if your family reads it. By the way, you can always use a pseudonym. What if you tell a story that maybe isn't perfect as you write it and maybe is going to need some help and you're afraid to share that story because it's not perfect? Whatever is going into your own inner narrative about yourself as the honoree of the call of your book, if you don't like the story you're telling, you all are storytellers. Start first by rewriting that story. Start the writing process first by owning the power of you telling the story of your own choosing about yourself as a writer. We are each an expression of the creativity of the divine. The cathedral of our life journey is an experience of holiness. This isn't a building that we go to. It's right inside of us, constructed every moment of our life. We build it by letting go of our need to manipulate, control, and judge mostly ourselves and our own perception of ourselves, so that we may simply learn to be the creative fulfillment of who we truly are. You are the creative fulfillment of yourself. And that's your job. That's your most powerful job, most important job as a writer and as somebody who is here to share and transmit a story. That's what I'm going to start us off with today as we begin our 2 days of our book writing and publishing adventure together, our challenge together. We're going to take a 15-minute break. During that break, I want you to obviously do all the basic things you need to do to take care of your body, but also I want you to really just pause for a minute and ask yourself, what is that sacred thing that I've been called to through this story? And to really, really take a moment, maybe go to the bathroom mirror or any other mirror you have and look at yourself in the mirror and go, dang, that's me. I got called. I got called into doing something really powerful, really sacred. And because that is so powerful, I can't not do it. It's too important to let the stories I'm telling about myself get in the way of fulfilling that purpose. So, all right, Michelle, you want to add anything?
I believe we come back on the same link. I'm going to
Yes.
stop the recording so that we can send out the replays on individual ones. But you're welcome to stay here and chat and hang out. And we'll be back in 15 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you.